After what looked like a serious injury for Jurickson Profar over the weekend, the Atlanta Braves get some good news. We'll discuss that. We'll also look at the prospects who could be traded this season and who are most likely not to be traded. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves and on Instagram at LockedOnBraves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Appreciate all your support throughout the offseason. We're almost there. Time for some regular season of Braves baseball. But for now, we got a lot of spring training action to talk about. And the one thing you want in spring training is for your starters to stay healthy. Everybody to stay healthy, but especially your starters, and especially the one big offseason move that you made. You want them to stay healthy, and that is, of course, Jurickson Profar. Some good news on him and his what looked like a potential scary injury on Saturday. Also, it is our Minors Monday Spotlight. We are going to take a look at the prospects most likely to be traded and prospects that the Braves will most likely not want to move this upcoming season. So a lot to talk about on today's episode of Locked On Braves, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Well, let's start with the big news of the weekend. On Saturday, had a great day at the ballpark with the family. Both my two oldest sons had a baseball game. My oldest hit a home run. It's a great day. I get home and I find out the Jurickson Profar injury news and saw the video. It looked really bad, rolled up on that wrist. Everybody thinking that it's broken. It looked like he was in a lot of pain. And x-rays were negative right after the game. Trainer George Poulos was encouraged by it. So you're getting some good signs here early on. He flew back to Atlanta for a CT scan on Sunday morning, then back to Florida that night. Mark Bowman reported Sunday night that Profar's CT scan showed a bone bruise and that the expectation is that he'll be ready for opening day. And we all breathe a little easier because it was looking like bad news, more bad injury news for the Atlanta Braves. And after what happened in 2024, and honestly, what happened after 2024 with the Joe Jimenez injury, not the way you want to start off 2025 with a major injury to one of your starters. And again, your prized offseason move in Jurickson Profar. So great news, nothing broken. However, I remain a little bit cautious about the opening day timeline. For one, as the Braves have done with a lot of their guys who were injured at the beginning of the year, just no reason to really push him if he needs more time, like that wrist heal up. The wrist is obviously a very important part of your swing, of your power that you have. So you want to make sure that that heals up, and you never know exactly how a bone bruise is going to heal and how much time it's going to take for him to get back. But in any case, the expectation is that he won't be out very long. And that is certainly good news for the Atlanta Braves. Actually just finished recording an NL East preview with the other host of the Locked On NL East teams. And they were all kind of skeptical of the Jurickson Profar move, calling it one of the worst moves in the NL East this offseason. And I pushed back on that a little bit, even though I was one at the beginning of the offseason, not all that excited about the prospect of getting Profar. But when you look into his type of profile, I think it fits exactly what the Braves need, and a guy who, at the very least, is going to be able to take his walks, get on base, put the ball in play. And the Braves just don't have that type of guy in the lineup. They got a lot of guys who can hit home runs and do a lot of damage. And when they're on and they're hitting like a Michael Harris, if he's hitting 290, you don't worry about a 4% walk rate. For an Ozzie Albies, when he's hitting 260, 270, you don't worry about his low walk rate. But Jurickson Profar can be that guy that you can put in the 8-9 spot, and he's going to get on base for the top of the order. Or you can put him at the top of the order, especially when Acuna's out, and you can get somebody on base for the big home run guys. So I think he does a lot of things well to help round out this offense, make it more of a complete offense. So I am very excited about the season coming up for Jurickson Profar, and glad to hear that nothing major there. But I do remain a little bit skeptical until we see him back out there and hear how that swing is feeling, because he does still have a bruise in that wrist. And again, a very important part of any hitter's swing, but hopefully it does heal up nicely and he'll be back by opening day or shortly after. Also, I just picked him up in my Dynasty League, so personally hoping that he's back soon. Let's go over some results very quickly. I'm going to hit each of the last 4 spring training games for the Braves. Starting on Monday, Chris Sale, 3 1/3 innings, 5 hits, 2 walks, 4 earned, and 2 strikeouts. Didn't look quite as sharp, especially as the game went on, and gave us some hard contact in those final couple of innings. Wind was blowing out to right field, which I think helped the Brandon Lowe home run that, it was 94 miles per hour off the bat. That's not terrible, but at that launch angle, don't usually see that get out, and it just carried over the right field wall where that wind was blowing pretty strong out. You saw a foul ball, what looked like was going to be in the stands on the third base side, blew back in and almost blew into fair territory that Riley missed. So that wind certainly was a factor, but still, he got hit pretty hard in this one, and it wasn't quite as sharp. Velo was still sitting more 93, 94. I'm not going to be too concerned about that. I'm really not going to be too concerned about that if that's where he is during the regular season, because with Chris Sale, it's mostly about that velo discrepancy between the slider and the fastball. And it's still almost a 20-mile-per-hour gap between those two pitches, and you tunnel off that, he's still going to be very, very effective, but something to certainly monitor. Obviously, I think you can be more effective and more dominant if you're hitting more 95, 96, 97, like we know he's capable of. Drake Baldwin got to catch Chris Sale again, which I think is noteworthy, as I believe we're pushing towards Drake Baldwin beginning the year as the Braves catcher with Sean Murphy out. He walked twice in this one, doubled the other way. We've seen him do it already several times in spring training, where he just drops the barrel on the bat, drops the barrel on the ball, and shoots it the other way for an easy hit. He does it again in this one, continues to have a great spring. Ozzie Albies, his rough spring training continues. I know he had 2 hits on Saturday over the weekend, but overall in spring training, 3 for 21, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. Now, I said on Mailbag podcast on Friday, guys like Albies, Riley, Olsen, they can go over 50 in spring training, and I'm not going to really worry too much about it. And I'm not worried at all about Ozzie, but there have been some pretty ugly swings from Ozzie Albies so far in spring training. The Braves had bases loaded, no outs before Ozzie and Riley struck out. They were facing Joe Boyle, who's up there throwing 100 miles per hour. Most hitters just aren't ready for that type of velocity at this point in spring training. But Matt Olson did bail them out, ripping a single up the middle. He's already had a pretty good spring training. Eli White's arm. I think Eli White's on this roster. I thought he was on this roster before spring training began. I think he's only solidified that with what we've seen from him in spring training. Not really so much on the offensive side of things, where I know he did get off to a good start, but we've seen the great play at second base. You saw the strong arm in this one, where he caught a fly ball heading towards the left field foul pole. He's flat-footed, throws it all the way into second base to get Josh Lowe, a really impressive throw. And Eli White's been good, and I think he's earned that final bench spot so far in spring training if nothing else happens. Daysville, a scoreless inning with a strikeout, did allow an infield single, but a good outing for him. Very quickly go through the rest of these, but on Sunday, another up-and-down outing, I thought, for A.J. Smith-Shawver. Saw some good stuff. He started off kind of rough in this one and then got rolling. Ultimately, 4 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 2 earned, 4 strikeouts. One thing I liked in that A.J. Smith-Shawver outing is that he started to work backwards in that 3rd and 4th inning. I believe it was Trump that was catching him in that one. And you saw him start at bats with some more curveballs and just curveballs in the zone. They were getting up, and you were having batters, make some good contact on him, but they were so out in front of him, because you got to be weary of 96 that you're out front on those breaking pitches, and you're not expecting that early in count. So I thought that was kind of a good change there from A.J. Smith-Shawver and Chadwick Trump to kind of work backwards in those last 2 innings, and you saw a lot of success for him there. And one thing I've really seen from A.J. this spring training, being able to locate that fastball at the knees. I feel like that is the one spot where I've seen that he's been able to consistently dot up that fastball in spring training. And with that changeup being his best secondary, that can become a very effective weapon for him, tunneling that fastball at the bottom of the zone with that changeup falling out of the bottom of the zone. That could be a really good mix for A.J. Smith-Shawver. Bryce Elder came on in relief of A.J. Smith-Shawver, gave up a home run to the first 2 batters that he faced. Another rough outing for Bryce Elder. Garrett Cooper hit a massive home run, a little spring training bat flip with that one. And Trump was 2 for 2. I've got a lot of comments about Sandy Leone maybe passing up Chadwick Trump as that backup catcher. So we're putting a little bit too much stock into spring training results, but here's Chadwick Trump going 2 for 2 to kind of limit any of that talk. On Saturday, Spencer Schwellenbach had a little bit of a rougher outing, 3 innings, 6 hits, 1 walk, 3 earned, 4 strikeouts. Angel Perdomo had a bit of a rough inning as well. Pitching was not great the last couple of days, but Perdomo gave up a hit, 2 walks, and a strikeout in 1 inning, but no earned runs thanks to a double play in there. So far in spring training, Perdomo, 5 innings, 3 hits, 3 walks, 2 earned runs, 3 strikeouts. He hasn't been quite as dominant as I was hoped. Now, I think he is going to be somebody we see mostly against lefties, but he hasn't been quite as dominant as I would have liked. He is coming back from Tommy John surgery, and you got to have a little grace for him there. But 3 strikeouts in 5 innings pitched for a guy who had over a 30% strikeout rate before the injury. Was hoping to see a little bit more from him. But again, coming back from Tommy John, it's spring training. Not going to be too concerned about that. Pierce Johnson went an inning and 2/3 on Saturday. Gave up 4 hits in that one, but just interesting that Brian Snitker let him go multiple innings. I wonder if we're going to see more of that from Pierce Johnson this year. Ozzie did have 2 hits on Saturday. I mentioned that, but outside of that game, it's been a pretty rough spring training for Ozzie. And then on Friday, Ronaldo Lopez, he also got roughed up a bit. 3 1/3 innings, 6 hits, 1 walk, 5 runs, 3 earned, no strikeouts. Velocity was down again, especially early on. He did crank it up in the last couple of innings, but something to monitor there with Ronaldo Lopez. Defense really let him down in that game as well. In that game on Friday, Daysville came on in the 4th inning, finished the inning with a strikeout and a fly out, but then came back out for the 5th and went single, double, ground out, single, strikeout. I only mentioned that because I think one thing Snitker's trying to find out in spring training as much as he can these guys do an up-down? Some relievers I don't think are as used to that and can do it as much. And we've seen him do that with a lot of relievers in spring training. Let them come in the middle of an inning, set them down, and then come back up. And that can be a challenge for a lot of relievers who aren't used to that. Then Dylan Covey, I got to mention him again. 2 scoreless innings so far this spring training. 5 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, no earned, 2 strikeouts. It's spring training. Not putting much stock into it, but the results have been very good for Covey, so wanted to mention that. And then also wanted to mention Nick Allen. We have not seen him since March 4th. Don't know of any type of injury update there. Christian Cairo's been getting a lot of run at shortstop here lately. Came on in relief of Arcia on Monday, but we have not seen Nick Allen in quite a while. So hopefully everything's okay there. He was having a great spring training. I think he's a lock for one of those bench spots. Hopefully we get a look at him on Tuesdays back in the lineup, but just wanted to mention that because it's been a little bit since we've seen Nick Allen in the lineup, and I have not heard any injury news on him. If you have, certainly let me know. I'll be looking out for that. Because I was excited about Nick Allen, so much so that I've had questions of people asking if he might take over for Orlando Arcia at some point. But to do that, he's got to be healthy, and hopefully he is. But again, look out for that in the coming days. All right, next we'll move our discussion to the prospect level. I'm going to tell you which prospects the Braves are definitely not going to trade this year and which prospects are the most likely to be traded. We'll discuss that here next. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. And living in Alabama, going to have a lot to do in the NCAA tournament with both Alabama and Auburn having great seasons, a great game over the weekend. So a lot of action there at FanDuel.com. Also, if you've moved on to that, and honestly, I have, you can check out MLB odds coming up for this season, the 2025 season. You check all that out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Again, visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Reminder, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On MLB as well. Solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. Let's jump into the next segment here. We're going to turn our discussion to the minor league level and talk about some prospects. As I'm doing this, let me know who you think is most likely to get traded this upcoming season. The Braves need to make a move for a bullpen or an arm. Who do you think is going to get moved. I'm going to start with who I think the Braves are most likely not to trade. I wouldn't necessarily call these prospects untouchable, although I think Drake Baldwin is probably untouchable, especially with what we heard from Grant McCauley earlier in the offseason and what the Braves now need at catcher. I think Drake Baldwin is certainly an untouchable at the moment. But outside of him, I don't believe there's anybody in the system that the Braves wouldn't move in the right deal. But here's 5 names that I think they are not likely to trade. One being Drake Baldwin that I already said. The other, I do think they want to hang on to A.J. Smith-Shawver. I think they're most confident in him being part of this rotation going forward, and quite frankly, so am I. So I believe they're going to try to hang on to A.J. Smith-Shawver and give him a full run at starter at some point this year. Cam Caminiti, obviously first-round draft pick. Diego Torrens, top international prospect they just signed. And Jose Perdomo. I think those are the 5 names in the system right now that, again, I wouldn't necessarily call them untouchable outside of Baldwin, but I think those are the 5 prospects that if another team mentions them in the trade, it's probably going to be a no-go. I think those are the 5 guys you certainly want to hang on to. Outside of that 5, I really think anybody could be moved. And like I said, I'm not necessarily against trading some of those names I just mentioned, but I think those were the ones that the Braves are going to try to hold on to the tightest. But outside of those 5, there's not anybody in this system that I don't think is tradable. Now, the prospects I think are most likely to be traded. I'm going to mention 5 names here as well. I'm going to group 3 of them together. The first one is Hurston Waldrop. Now, there is still a good bit of value with Hurston Waldrop. You have seen him fall down some rankings as of late. A lot of prospect rankings out there. You've seen Hurston Waldrop kind of slide down a little bit after a disappointing 2024 season where we didn't see him make the strides that you wanted to see him make with his stuff. MLB Pipeline now has him ranked 4th overall in the Braves system. I've seen some people rank him as low as 7 in the Braves system. I think I had him 3rd. So again, I still think there's a lot of value there now, but he comes out and has another rough season as a starter. He's going to start to lose some of that value. Now, I don't think it's going to totally go away because I believe it's still a very high floor for Hurston Waldrop as a really good, dominant setup reliever, maybe even a closer. So I still think the floor is high enough for Hurston Waldrop that he's going to be able to give you good value. If there's a big trade to be made this season, I think Waldrop could headline that deal. And I think the Braves will be willing to do that. Yes, you're giving up on a kid with a lot of upside that if it does ever come together, you're talking about top of the rotation stuff. And if it doesn't, you're still looking at a very good bullpen arm. But I think the Braves are willing to part with that because of the risk if they get something really good. I'm not saying they're just going to give up and give away Hurston Waldrop, but it would have to be in a pretty significant type of deal. Now, this might be the player. The next one I'm going to mention might be the player, the prospect that I think is most likely to be traded out of all, and that is Nacho Alvarez. And part of that is just because it's a similar situation to what you have with Vaughn Grissom, a guy who's knocking on the door. He's done just about all he can at the minor league level. He's ready to at least get an opportunity, but the Braves don't have a place to give him one. I think they've pretty much moved him off a shortstop at this point. Before getting injured, we didn't see him at shortstop at all in spring training, and they made the transition to third base at the end of last year. And I believe that's where he likely fits because he has the arm to be on the left side. I've just always been questionable of the range. So I think third base is the likely home for him, but then he hasn't shown that power for a typical third baseman. Now, he is still very, very young. We have to remember that, but there really haven't been a lot of strides in the power department except for when he got to AAA last year. You saw him and Drake Baldwin both show off a lot of power. So maybe it is there. Could he become a 2025 home run bat at third base? And even if that's the case, Austin Riley's here for a long time and is a really good player. So what do you do with Nacho Alvarez? Again, it becomes a similar situation to Vaughn Grissom where there's just no place to put him. Now, I made the argument with Vaughn Grissom that I would much rather just hold on to him and have that depth in case O'Reilly gets injured or an Ozzie Albies gets injured. You have that depth in the farm system. That's something the Braves haven't had for a while. It's what hurt them last year is that they didn't have that next guy up. They didn't have that prospect position player to come up to fill in. And you have that at least in Nacho Alvarez, and you had that before in a Vaughn Grissom. So I'm certainly not sitting here saying the Braves should give up on any of these players and just give them away. But Nacho is very clearly blocked. And there's also a real scenario where Nacho Alvarez is nothing more than a super utility type of player. Again, he's young. I like Nacho Alvarez. I have his Bowman auto behind me. But I think that's a likely outcome. Whereas the floor for Hurston Waldrop, I think, is still a setup closer type reliever. The floor for Nacho Alvarez is just a super utility type of guy off the bench. And I think that's a realistic scenario for Nacho Alvarez if that power never comes and he just and he's just a 260, 270 hitter, good on base, but 10 to 15 home run type of power, 15 to 20 stolen base potential. You're looking at a Willie Castro, I think, is probably a comp of a guy that can play multiple positions, although Nacho can't play outfield, but just a guy that does a little bit of everything for you, but doesn't excel in any one thing is what I'm mostly trying to convey there. So if the deal comes up, I could see the Braves trading Nacho Alvarez because they just don't have anywhere to put him and he's knocking on the door. I could see them trading him for, maybe a good bullpen, a setup guy that I would hope it has, a year or two of control. Look at the Vaughn Grissom deal. They traded for Chris Sale, who did ultimately have 2 years of control. There was an option year in there before the Braves made it a guarantee year. I can see them doing something similar like that for a setup guy or maybe a mid-rotation type of pitcher. Again, not just giving up Nacho Alvarez. That was my whole deal with Vaughn Grissom. Don't just give him up. If you're going to trade him for somebody that could be very valuable to your team now, and that's what the Braves did. But I think Nacho Alvarez could find himself in a similar spot this year. And then the last three I'm grouping together because I think one of Drew Hackenberg, Lucas Braun, and Blake Burkhalter could be traded at some point this year because I view them all very similarly as guys with high floors as back-end starters. Maybe you believe some of those guys have higher upside, but I think they're all very safely fourth, fifth starters in a big league rotation. I think they all very likely hit that at some point. But how many of those guys do you really need? And those guys can be expendable. For Hackenberg and Burkhalter and maybe Braun, I just don't know. We haven't seen that yet. I think those guys are also have safe floors as solid relievers. So, either they become solid back-end guys for you, they can give you 150 innings of a 3.75 to a 4.25 ERA or 4.5 ERA, something like that, or they become solid, middle relievers for you. So I think all those arms are very safe, but they're also somewhat expendable. I can see one of them getting moved for a bullpen arm at the deadline. So to me, the most likely prospects to be traded this year, Hurston Waldrop for a big move, Nacho Alvarez for a pretty solid move, and Drew Hackenberg, Lucas Braun, or Blake Burkhalter for a decent bullpen addition, something like that. I think those are the 5 prospects most likely to get traded. And again, I don't think they'll trade all of Hackenberg, Braun, and Burkhalter. You do need some of those guys for depth in your system, but I think at least one of them is probably expendable in the right move. Again, I don't think the Braves need to just I like all of these guys, but if the Braves are going to make some moves this season, you got to give away something. And I think these are the guys most likely to get traded. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Who do you think is most likely traded of the Braves prospects this upcoming season? Who do you not want to see them trade? Who do you think the Braves want to hold on to the most? Let me know in the comment section down below. All right, next we'll wrap things up here with a little bit of news and some of your comments. We'll get into all of that here next. Well, thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. A lot of action coming your way this week on the podcast. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Braves. Getting to some of your comments here. Gene Gordy says, Jake, it kills me. I really wanted Waldrop in the pen, and he can be. And I've said this many times already this offseason. I think you give it till the All-Star break. You let Hurston Waldrop start again at AAA this year as a starter. And if he's not progressing by the All-Star break, I think you start to transition him into that bullpen role for the prospect that you could bring him up in the Braves bullpen at some point this year. So again, if they don't trade him, and if he is not making those adjustments as a starter, I think you start making that transition to a reliever at the beginning or at the middle of this season. That's what I think the Braves would do and should do. But we'll see. Gene also said Nacho is probably going to get traded. I think he is the most likely to get traded. He's blocked. There's a possibility that he is just a utility player. Trade him while he still has some of that value. I think he is the most likely one to get traded. Jeff Berry, Cooper can play some outfield too, right? When you say play outfield, yes, he can be out there in a pinch if you needed to. But I don't think that is the plan for Garrett Cooper this year. Braves thrills. AJ Smith-Shawver seems like he's in trading block. I don't think so. I think AJ Smith-Shawver has shown enough that the Braves believe in him and believe that he could be a part of the future. I certainly do. I think there's certainly upside with both AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop. Where I've flipped on them is I think AJ Smith-Shawver is closer to that than Hurston Waldrop is at this point. Braves thrills also said I think Baldwin is a future hits leader. Not at the catcher position. You're just not going to get the at-bats for that. But he has looked very good. And again, that opposite field approach we've seen from him this offseason has been very impressive. We all know about the power and the power potential there. But if he can, continue to hit like he has in spring training, then he is going to bat for a high average, to your point there. I think he's certainly capable of doing that. Emmanuel Fuentes, I liked Sabine Ceballos better than Nacho. I like Ceballos as well. I forget who the Braves traded him for, but I did like Ceballos. I'd also really liked Nacho, but I like Nacho in the hope that the power was going to come, and we just haven't seen that yet from Nacho Alvarez. But I like Ceballos as well. When he got drafted, I thought he was, had the potential to go in really a Nacho Alvarez type of a route. Somebody who can play multiple positions. He could play catcher. But that has not been the case. A little bit of injury news around the NL East. They want to mention the Mets losing Francisco Alvarez for 6 to 8 weeks. Garrett Cole looking like he might have to have Tommy John surgery. So it's not just the Braves right now. A lot of injuries happening in spring training that time of year. It's an unfortunate part of the game. But it's not just the Braves that are getting hit by it. It's some other teams as well. All right, that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode. I really do appreciate all the support. Really looking forward to the season. Again, we just recorded the NL East preview. I think that's coming out on the 24th. So look for that. A lot of good discussion and debate and talk with that and all the other NL East hosts. But I got to also have a special guest coming on, I think that same day, no, the 20th of March. Got a special guest coming on the show. So looking forward to that. Oh, and I'm looking to start a fantasy baseball league. 12 teams, going to have to limit it to that. And I'm going to give first service to everydayers on here that I know, but look for my post on social media asking about that. If you'd like to be in that league, respond to that and see if we'll get you in. We've already had a lot of people say they want to, so I'm going to have to leave several people out. I apologize for that, but again, want to give everydayers the first crack at it, and then I will get to all the you who responded to that post, try to get them in order that they came in. But thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks to PJ's Braves, our Guinness, Jeffrey Humphreys, Braves Thrills, PJ's Braves, Titans Mafia. How long before we bring Chavez again? I saw a post the other day where Jesse Chavez is kind of getting lit up in spring training. So maybe he'll be back here pretty shortly, especially if Pilar doesn't really, turn out as a Rule 5 pick and the Braves don't know what to do with that last bullpen spot. Hey, never rule it out that Jesse Chavez could make his return. But we will return on Tuesday with more of your Braves spring training action. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you follow us on social media at shortstopball and at LockedOn_Braves. Hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below, and we will talk to you next time.